Hey, this is Pastor Bunjee Garrett, and I want to take this opportunity to present you with another word of encouragement. Well, here we are, it's March 1st, 2022, and what this means is that the primaries for November's midterm elections have begun here in America. That's right, the midterm calendar kicks off today here in the great state of Texas. And so if you're a registered voter here in Texas and you have not yet voted through, the early voting opportunities, well, then you have until 7 p.m. today to go get in line at a polling location, and it's there where you can help to select the political leaders who will be on the ticket in November. Now, for those of you who ended up fleeing from a blue state because of the unconstitutional COVID lockdown measures that nearly left you bankrupt or unable to earn a living, then I encourage you to realize that the policies of the progressive left, those policies are the reason why you had to move out of a blue state and to a red state like Texas. And so listen, if you think that you can vote for the same old policies of the progressive left while expecting a different outcome here in Texas or in another red state, listen, it's time to wake up. It's time to wake up and realize that you fled from a blue state and you ran to a red state because of the conservative policies that allowed you to earn a living. And with that, I encourage you to vote accordingly. It's also important for every American to realize that the progressive left is currently shifting their messaging. And the reason why is because they see the polls. Yeah, they see the polls and they know that they're about to see a huge red wave sweeping across our country. Case in point, there's a new ABC poll which finds that only 37% of Americans approve of Joe Biden's job performance, while only 30% of independents, like myself, are willing to agree with this. And to that, I have to ask, what job performance are you looking at? But seriously, the same poll has also revealed that 55% of Americans actually disapprove of Biden's performance. In order to explain why, ABC's Gary Langer goes on to inform us of, and I quote, "Economic discontent is hurting President Joe Biden and his party's midterm election prospects, with 6 in 10 Americans reporting inflation hardships and 3/4 saying the economy's in bad shape, and a nearly 20-point lead for the Republican Party in trust to handle it." Yeah, that's right. More than half of Americans are suffering from what I like to call Bidenflation. Yeah, Bidenflation. That's what we're suffering. And as a result, Biden's approval rating has been affected by his progressive policies. Not only that, but his approval rating has also been affected by a few political promises that he failed to fulfill. I'll remind you, it was during his campaign when he assured us that he was going to crush COVID. Here's how Biden put it, and I quote, "I'm not going to shut down the country. I'm not going to shut down the economy, but I'm going to shut down the virus." That's right. This is a pledge, a promise that Biden presented at least 12 times during his campaign for presidency. And yet now we know that his progressive policies, they not only wrecked our economy, they also failed to shut down the virus. As a matter of fact, there were more COVID deaths during the first year of Biden's administration than the final year under Trump. And that's even with the availability of 3 vaccines, which I've been told are both safe and effective. But speaking of broken promises, I should remind you that Biden assured us at least 11 times that he wouldn't use vaccine mandates here in America. For example, it was during a press conference back in December of 2020 when Biden was asked about vaccine mandates, and in response, he declared this, and I quote, "I don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand it to be mandatory." Well, rather than keeping this political promise, Biden actually went on to create chaos here in our country by attempting to use OSHA to enforce a vaccine mandate on every company here in America with more than 100 employees, because, COVID isn't interested in those companies with less than 100 employees. I think the science would support this, right? Well, not only did Biden do his best to break this political promise, but then he ended up keeping this political promise after failing to break it. That's right. It was in the middle of this past January when the Supreme Court actually decided to stay Biden's vaccine or test mandate for large private employers. And in this way, we can see how Biden was forced to keep his promise after attempting to break it. The man's not even good at breaking political promises. But seriously, with all this in mind, it's no wonder that Biden's approval rating is so low. And we shouldn't be surprised to learn that Biden's polling firm just sent out a memo to the Democrat Party in an attempt to stop this red wave that's clearly coming. And with that being the case, I want to take a moment to consider the content of this memo, which was recently leaked, because I want to consider and better understand the way that they plan to manipulate the masses by changing their messaging. You know, at the top of the list of this article here, it's this memo that has gone out from Biden's polling firm, and they're directing the Democrats to, and I quote here, declare the crisis phase of COVID over and push for feeling and acting more normal. They want to get back to normal. And in the explanatory section of this first point, we find this incredible piece of political spin as this polling firm declares, and I quote, Democrats have a tremendous opportunity to claim an incredible historic success. They vaccinated hundreds of millions of people, prevented the economy from going into freefall, kept small businesses from going under, and got people back to work safely. Okay. You know, I can agree on one point here that the Democrats have a tremendous opportunity to claim an incredible historic success. However, it would be a claim that's almost entirely false. As a matter of fact, it was last June when data from the Federal Reserve revealed this, that 12 of the 15 states that had already returned to pre-pandemic levels of economic activity, they were led by Republican governors, not Democrats. That's right, 12 of the 15 that were economically doing well, those states were led by Republican governors, not Democrats. And so Democrats can claim that this was their success, but it's a false claim. As for the so-called success of their COVID policies, well, that's entirely debatable. As a matter of fact, you know, the 4 states that had the highest case counts and the highest mortality rates, those 4 states are California, New York, Florida, and Texas. Yeah, that's right. The 2 states with the strictest COVID restrictions and the 2 states with the least restrictions ended up experiencing similar outcomes. With that being the case, it would be deceptive and highly debatable for the Dems to insist that it's their unconstitutional COVID restrictions that, you know, helped us to learn to live with COVID, right? Therefore, as the Dems prepare to claim an incredible success over the pandemic, we know that this is nothing more than political posturing designed to maintain their tyrannical control through the shifting of their message. Now, this brings us to the second point that we find here in this leaked memo, which is stated in this way, and I quote, recognize that people are worn out and feeling real harm from the years-long restrictions and take their side. That's what they emphasize, that they're worn out, so take their side. Why does this feel like I'm reading a script from the next season of Arrested Development? Are the Democrat leaders so clueless that they need a polling firm to coach them so that they might realize that the majority of Americans are over it? Do they actually need to be reminded of the fact that they're supposed to be servants of the people, not overlords who are ruling over us? Well, regardless of how you might answer these questions, listen, this polling firm decided that the Dems need to understand, and I quote, most Americans have personally moved out of crisis mode. Twice as many voters are now more concerned about COVID's effect on the economy at 49%, than about someone in their family or someone they know becoming infected with the coronavirus, which is at 24%. Yeah, listen, because many Americans are broke now. Many Americans, because of overreaching COVID restrictions, are completely broke, and these COVID restrictions actually caused the permanent closure of roughly 200,000 U.S. establishments over and above the annual average. And while Biden was nice enough to give us 3 stimulus checks totaling, $3,200 per person, I'm guessing that the 200,000 plus Americans who lost their business during the lockdowns don't really see this as a successful exchange. Listen, knowing that this is just another reason for why Biden's approval rating is so low, this polling company has instructed the Dems to acknowledge COVID still exists and likely will for a long time, and then also that they need to stop setting a COVID zero as the goal line. Yeah, exactly what we've been saying this whole time. You can't have a COVID zero policy without becoming a tyrant. Finally, in the fifth section of this memo, this polling firm has instructed the Dems to, and I'm quoting here, stop talking about restrictions and the unknown future ahead. Then, in order to explain their point, they state the following, and I quote again, if Democrats continue to hold a posture that prioritizes COVID precautions over learning how to live in a world where COVID exists but does not dominate, they risk paying dearly for it in November. Oh, so this isn't about, trying to drop COVID cases. This isn't about our so-called safety and measures for mitigation. And this isn't about their vaccine victories. No, instead, this polling firm is informing the Dems that if they continue on their current course, they're going to lose in November. That's what this is all about. What this means then is that the Dems who you see starting to shift their policies, the ones who are starting to lighten up on their lockdowns and get rid of the mask mandates, those who are making these moves, they're only showing us that they would rather give up these policies that they've claimed for the last 2 years to be saving lives. They would rather give up these policies in order to win an election than to continue saving lives as they have been claiming. And listen, I don't care what side of the aisle the politician is on. The political leader who's willing to try to win at all costs, even giving up things that they've been claiming are true, listen, that kind of leader does not deserve to occupy a position of leadership here in our country. If they're willing to give up on truth in order to win an election, then they're not good leaders. With all that in mind, I encourage you to take part in our political system by taking advantage of every opportunity we have to vote. Do not sit home and do not sit this one out. We need to go vote. And with this as the goal, I encourage you to remember what our founding father, John Jay, said when he declared this: Providence has given to our people the choice of their rulers, and it is the duty as well as the privilege and interest of our Christian nation to select and prefer Christians for their rulers. According to John Jay, who was not only the original Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, but who also served as the President of Congress. According to him, God has providentially provided every American with the right to elect our rulers. And with that being the case, well, John Jay insisted that it's our duty, as well as our privilege, and in our interest, to select and prefer Christians for our rulers. With this as our duty and our privilege, I encourage every Christian to take part in the midterm elections, beginning with the primary that's taking place today right here in Texas. And as you head to the polls, I encourage you to prayerfully seek the wisdom of our Savior Jesus Christ, because Jesus is the one who is helping us to fight the good fight of faith, and all for the glory of God.